And welcome back to the show, everybody. Well, we've got a very special guest on the phone right now. We've got filmmaker Simon Emmett, who is here to chat to us about an amazing brand new documentary that I know a lot of you out there are going to love. It is called Welcome to the Darkness. So we thought, let's get Simon on the phone to chat a little bit about this great documentary. Welcome to the program, Simon.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
No worries. Now, Simon, this is such an amazing documentary, of course, about the band The Darkness. Tell us a little bit about your journey with this film. Where did it all start out for you?
It started in 2015. The band, through a mutual friend, actually came to a screening of another film that I'd made, and we all got on really well, and decided at that point that maybe it would be fun just to film for a couple of weeks for the hell of it, kind of see what they're up to and have a bit of a laugh with it all. And little did I know, but 8 years later, the film's come out. So it was kind of a very kind of organic kind of process. We just kind of started for no reason, just to see how it was going to go.
You said that you got on so well with them. What was that like when you first sat down to talk to them? It sounded like it went really, really well.
Well, they were at a stage, I think, where they were in a really good place, although they were kind of at the into their kind of comeback. But I think they were enjoying it, and they were working really hard, and it just felt that, from my point of view, it felt like good timing, because it was clear to me that there was access that potentially, at another point in the arc there wouldn't be.
Yeah.
So I felt like it was an opportunity from a kind of storytelling point of view to sort of experience, to watch and experience with them what that kind of journey was going to be like.
Yeah.
So yeah, it felt like there was a kind of it was an opportunity.
So tell us a little bit about that story, because you said when you first started talking to them, it was like just come and film for a couple of weeks and see where it goes kind of thing. When did you start to develop the story that we see in the documentary? Because like for your other documentary, Underhill, of course, there was a story there from the very start. What was it like for you going into this with perhaps not a clear story there at the very start?
Well, I think it didn't become apparent to me until we were a few years in that, that we'd sort of gone so far that we kind of couldn't pull out. And there was a question of like exactly what you're asking, kind of what is the story here? Because obviously the comeback was interesting, and their personalities and their personal journeys was really interesting. But the kind of jeopardy that happens in the film kind of needed to happen. I do remember at one point they were on a show with, I think, Steve Jones in LA, and he actually asked who I was, and Dan said, "Oh, he's just waiting for one of us to die." And I think his point was that we got to a stage with the filming where something significant kind of felt like it needed to happen in order to kind of complete the circle.
Yeah.
And I don't want to ruin the kind of film for people, but obviously there's a couple of things that happen that kind of do that. But I think it's a testament to kind of just persistence. We knew there was a great story there. It was just a case of keeping going.
The band members are so open in this documentary. It's interesting because I watch a lot of music documentaries, and you hear a lot about different music documentaries where supposedly the artist is being really candid and really honest, and then you watch it and you don't get any of that. But you do get that with this film. Tell us a little bit about that. What was that like, sitting down doing those interviews, especially when the band members were being so candid and honest?
Well, I think that there was a lot of trust gained from having, firstly, a very, very small crew of people involved in the production, and secondly, that we just kind of kept filming for so long that you inevitably develop friendships and relationships with the crew and band members, and it all kind of it all ends up feeling more and more natural and more kind of easygoing, and I think really that level of kind of intimacy in the interviews came from the kind of all of the time that was spent before building up that trust and those relationships, and I think that was kind of the payoff, I suppose.
Because the band did become your friends, the more emotional sides of this documentary, did you feel that you yourself were being taken on an emotional journey as well?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, there was a kind of, there was a roller coaster element to the kind of making of this, not just during the filming, but in particular during the editing. I mean, I felt strongly that I wanted to not just make a film that would tell that story, but it needed to be right and respectful by them. It was important to me that they were treated with the kind of integrity, that they deserved, and that, I was very keen to find that balance, that where they would feel, where we would tell the story, but they would feel that it was done in a kind of respectful way and that it wasn't manufactured or overhyped.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there was a kind of lot of work went into that side.
You said that you'd been filming for years with them. How much footage did you have to go through when it came down to the editing process? And talk us through that editing process as well. How did you decide what went into the documentary and what didn't make it in?
Well, I mean, firstly, in terms of the scale of the filming, I mean, we had a huge amount of footage. I can't tell you right now in terms of hours, but my cameraman Sam Ford spent a huge amount of time with them, even when I wasn't there. He'd either be on the tour bus or kind of flying around the world with them often, and we really built up a huge amount of footage. We then hit COVID, and we attempted to edit the film during COVID, and I think that's where, for a while, it became very tricky, because editing anything when you can't sit in the same room as people is hard enough, but editing something like that over a load of Zoom calls was incredibly hard, and actually proved to be almost impossible. The film went through a few incarnations before it reached its kind of, its final form, and that was greatly because the sheer amount of footage and the fact that we had to do it all remotely. Sorry, I feel like I've lost the question now, but I hope that answers that.
Yeah, it does. Now, I should have asked this earlier, but were you a fan of the band before you started on the documentary, or what was your kind of relationship with their music at that time?
I mean, I thought they were great. I remember clearly, when they kind of exploded onto the scene, it was impossible to ignore them. Everybody, especially in the UK, they were everywhere. They were huge, and they had obviously a significant impact on the whole music scene because they were so different at that time. I can't kind of say I was a kind of super fan, but I definitely like them. I think I became more of a fan through the filming and actually seeing them at work. I certainly liked them back then, but I think if I was too much of a fan, that would have clouded the filmmaking process anyway. I don't think that would have been right.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to ask that, how important was that for you as a filmmaker to not kind of make that fan love kind of film, but instead make a documentary that's got a little bit of grit to it, and also tells such an important story about such an important band?
They were actually very much into the idea of it also not being a kind of puff piece. They very much wanted something that had the grit. So we were very aligned on that kind of vision, that it wasn't going to be something that a record label would have been inclined to put out, or it wasn't going to be what people would see as a promo piece. Yeah. And fair play to them for that, because I think, they do open up in it. There's certainly, I hope, things in the film that differentiate it from, I suppose, a record label documentary or a traditional factual doc. But I think what's important for me is that I always wanted it to be a character study about them more than a factual piece about the band. Yeah. And there's an important distinction there, because I think that, someone else can make a factual piece about the band at some point, and I'm sure that would be great. But for me, it was very much about a character study of these guys during the time that we were together.
Definitely. Now, we are running out of time very quickly, so I've just got two quick questions to ask you. First of all, a question I love to love to ask documentary filmmakers. What was the one moment during the making of this documentary where you felt, wow, I can't believe that just happened, and what did you learn from that moment?
There are so many of those moments. That's such a difficult question because they really are. They're such a fun bunch of guys, and they're quite kind of out there. So, bringing that down. I think there was an incident filming Dan. We filmed Dan in chopping down some trees, and there was a kind of near accident at that point. That was one occasion that kind of was certainly not something I'd recommend on the day job. I think to be honest, if I'm really the one moment for me that was really where you really thought, God, is this really happening? Was the gig in Ireland.
Yep.
For me, it just building up to it, going the day before for sound check, seeing their kind of front of house guy Andy trying to find some. I think he was trying to find some coloured lighting from someone who lived locally and see if he could borrow something that might have a kind of coloured light bulb in it and stuff like that. It was so humble and so lo-fi in such a kind of inspiring way. It was really quite incredible to see that band in that venue. In fairness to them, it was very engineered and it was meant to be a set of warm-up gigs. It was never kind of, we're in a pub because we've come to that level. But I think still it was quite something to see them in that environment.
Definitely. Now, Simon, to finish off, what would you like to say to all of our listeners out there before they sit down this weekend to watch Welcome to the Darkness?
Well, that's a good question. That's a very good question. I suppose I'd say, if you're going to watch it, I hope what comes out of it is the idea that even in today's culture with social media and the way that success seems to be bandied about now online, I think there's still hope for talented people with their own vision and their own determination and enthusiasm that you can do it your way. And you can make it work. And I think that's, for me, one of the big takeouts is that they never tried to do it anyone else's way. It was always about doing it their way.